Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So today, Graham, we've got another returning guest. We've got Martin Booth back with us. It's some time since Martin was on the show, so I thought it'd be great to catch up and see where Martin's business has gone in the meantime.
Yeah, welcome, Martin, back to the Next 100 Days podcast.
Graham, Kevin, as ever, absolute pleasure to catch up with you guys. Really good to see you.
We know that for those people who didn't hear you the first time, then you can check out, I think it's episode 148, and you'll be able to tell the difference between Martin now in 2022 and Martin in late 2018. And in the meantime, you've developed your business into quite a tour de force, Martin. So tell us a bit more about that.
It's been an interesting time, Graham. That was, as you say, November of 2018. At that point, I'd been hammering away at things as a copywriter for about a year and a half. And at that time, I thought, progress is good. It's going in the direction that I want it to go. But looking back, I don't think I realized how far I still had to go in terms of the progress that I was making. And yeah, for the last 3 years, things have been pretty much where I wanted them to be. I've had some fantastic clients, some clients that I'm still working with on an ongoing basis, others who come in for maybe one big project. But all in all, business has been busy, which is good. What I wanted. And as I'm sure I said to you guys before, in some ways I'm my own worst enemy because I love what I do. I love writing. So there have been times when I've said yes to things and then thought, when am I going to do this? Because I'm so busy. But I want to be busy. When I set out to run a business, I wanted it to be busy. I wanted to have lots of clients. I wanted to have lots of opportunities.
So, okay, tell us a little bit then, Martin, as to what was it that really brought that flood of business on for you?
I think in retrospect, it's thinking that in those first 18 months, 2 years, I was just out there doing work for people who then recommended me to others. I was doing a lot of networking, a lot of that sort of soft marketing of just being out there and introducing to myself. And, I'd like to think doing good work for people so that eventually the message gets through that this is someone who can help you with your written words, your business requirements, and can move things forward for you. And it would be impossible to pinpoint just one factor. But I think anyone who's started and built and grown a small business would say the same thing. You do lots of things. You go to lots of meetings, lots of networking events, and you do the work, and you do the work to the best of your ability. And when someone turns around and says, "I'm delighted with this," you say, "Well, can you do me a testimonial?" Because people will be checking out your Google, your LinkedIn, anywhere that people can say nice things about you. And it just builds up a momentum. And like I say, I think it's several factors.
So, all right, okay. You're now at a networking meeting, and because I've followed you on LinkedIn, and you've mentioned networking more than once. And I just, is there something about your approach in that sort of setting that helped you? I mean, I'm sure that going up to somebody and talking to them about copywriting isn't what you've been doing. You do something else. What is it that you've been doing in those networking meetings?
One of my former clients absolutely nailed this. He's a sales guru based in Tennessee. And he said, "Who do you remember most when you go to a network? You remember the person who asked you lots of questions." So it's all, as you say, Graham, it's the absolute opposite of going in and saying, "Hi, my name's Martin. Here's my business card. Let's do some work together." It's going in and just being interested in and listening and not being sort of frantic and desperate and having what this guy used to call commission breath. We're desperate to close a deal, and you reek of it.
Yeah.
And you go in and say, "Look, this is me and what I do, but tell me about you." And then making connections, between the people that you meet and just being interested in.
Curious, then. Are you a naturally curious person, Martin?
Yeah, definitely. I find myself going to networking meetings and coming out and thinking, I've not spoken about myself at all, but I've met some really interesting people.
All right, well, we're going to put this to the test because you actually are quite a clever individual. Now we can put you on the test and we put you to test here. because you've got Kevin over there in Northumberland. Imagine that you're in some sort of networking event. So you're just about meeting Kevin. Kevin's wearing, a severe black and white striped suit, which is making him stand out, to be honest with you. And you wander up to him and you say,
"You must be a Newcastle fan, mate. Tell me all about it."
Oh, and there we've kicked off a conversation that could last about 3 days. As we did the last time I recorded a podcast with Martin, and we had a chat afterwards.
But there's always something. It doesn't have to be, "Hello, Kevin. How's your business?" Though, it's always interesting though. How are things with you? How are you doing? How's things going? But sometimes I was writing a CV for someone just last week, and I said always put in things at the end, like I play golf, I watch football, whatever, because you could find someone on the other side of a desk who says, "That's interesting. Where do you play golf? What do you play off?" Yeah. And you start building a rapport as people rather than as representatives of a business. And so the conversation just goes from there.
You pick up on some sort of cue, etc. I know this might seem Billy Basic, but you've actually made a success of networking, and the big thing to take away is not to pitch what's it called, the elevator pitch, and then bore somebody away from you, because as soon as you start with that, you're mentally backing away, aren't you? I mean, you're looking for the next person.
Let's face it, we're swamped constantly with things like that. And the number of unsolicited emails I seem to get every day from somebody that wants to redevelop my website or build me an app or write me some blog posts. So, it's just noise, and it just all washes over my head, and I take no notice of it.
I think obviously at some point in the conversation, someone's going to say, "And what do you do?" And something that I worked on a year or so back, and I've done talks on this as well, is your 10-word intro. You can distill what it is that you do into 10 words. And specifically, not just what you do, but the benefit you bring to people. So if someone said to me, like I was networking this morning, someone said, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm a copywriter. I write great words that help you get more." That's 10 words. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not going to stand there and talk for 5 minutes about the people I do it for, whatever. The conversation can move on, but you just had a nice little pithy.
So let's hear that one again, because I see this as almost like your unique sales proposition, but go on.
I write great words that help you get more business.
Wow.
I do more than that. I know we can talk in detail about how I did it before, but this is what I do. And the idea of it for most of the people I do it for is they want to get more business. They want more people to read their blogs, read their websites, listen to their speeches, whatever it is I've written.
Because it naturally, the thing about that pitch or the 10 words, etc., is that the next thing they say is how.
Yes. And that's really interesting, actually, because that you keeping it short puts the emphasis back onto them to ask another question.
And I'll tell you where it came from, because I can't claim credit for it, but it struck me. I was at a networking event during lockdown online. There's 4 of us sat around this virtual table. And one of the guys who said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I help you pay less tax and make more money." Now, as you can imagine, everyone, the other 3 of us at the table said, "Don't stop there. Carry on. Tell us more." And he said, "Yeah, I'm an accountant." If I say I'm an accountant, everyone starts looking at, time for a cup of tea. But he pitched it so beautifully. And I said to him, "I'm going to use that. I'm going to take that away and find something." There's a way of saying the benefit you bring to people through what you do, and you can do it in 10 words. And as you say, Graham, absolutely right. People say, "Tell me more."
Yeah, and they should do. I listening to an old Dan Kennedy tape this last few days, and he talked about a unique sales proposition, and he talked about probably the most famous sales proposition ever written, certainly in the last couple of decades, and it was with somebody who dominated their market over in the States, and it was a pizza company, and I didn't realize this, but in the States they eat pizza 3 times a week. I mean, God, what on earth do they want to do to their waistlines? But the point is, that's apparently it's quite a popular meal.
That's on the 10 occasions they're not eating burgers.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose they have to have a bit of variation. But the guy who started Domino's Pizza, he basically came up with a unique sales proposition. This is back when he had a crummy pizza place, and it was fresh hot pizza delivered in 30 minutes or less, guaranteed. That's it. And his business just went, he became, I think, one of the top 1,000 richest people on the planet through this sort of focus on having what you were talking about was almost like that elevator type thing, but it was a much shorter. It invoked a sort of less a kind of a response, and what the Tom, I think it's Moynihan, I think from the pizza place for Domino's Pizza, that was all about saying this is our unique sales proposition. One about being the best pizza. It doesn't even say that. It just means fresh, hot. And of course, where do you think they're all sited? Near university grounds. So because what do? They smoke pot, and the next thing they need is some carbohydrates. They don't care how good it is. They just need to know that they can set their watch to when it's going to turn up. So it really, really smart way of doing it. What I like about what you've done is that you've distilled your art and craft into those 10 words.
Yeah, I wish it was as good as that, because fresh, hot. You said the first 2 words, fresh, hot pizza. You're there. You're bought in. You are. Appeals to the senses.
Yeah.
And then you say, because everyone orders pizza, and what's the biggest pain in the neck about it is waiting for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say, and the word, the 10th word of that pitch is guarantee.
Yes.
Oh yeah. If we don't, go somewhere else.
Well, people don't guarantee their work, do they? I mean, and it actually is probably one of the strongest. It does take, you're biting off a bit, and you have to be clear about what your guarantee is. But if in his case, turn up in 30 minutes, then well, it's free.
Yeah.
But the truth of it is that it organised. It's a bit like McDonald's. You think about why McDonald's so much more successful than say Pizza Hut is because McDonald's have got a process. And they're like the American Fifth Army. They know exactly what they're going to do. Whereas Pizza will probably make a better burger, but they're all over the bloody shop. So I do think there's something about distilling your craft to something that's really clever. So I've picked this up from this copywriting expert that you've invited on again, Kevin. I mean, he's brilliant already.
That's it. I knew you'd learn something, Graham. See.
Yeah. But the
whole series of 300 odd podcasts is all about educating Graham Arrowsmith.
There's probably a film there, isn't there? Let's face it. But copywriting in Kingston, you still live down by the Thames then somewhere?
Yeah, we're still in Kingston, and I've got clients who are local, clients all over London, and more recently quite a few international clients as well in the States. I've got a client in Argentina. Because as I think we've said before, copywriting is geographically agnostic. You can be anywhere in the world and tell a story and get a message across. Doesn't matter what people are. And yeah, there's been a lot of clients in the local area and across London, and it just has been keeping me busy.
Were they referrals for you, Martin? Especially the Argentinian and the American.
They come in different ways. Funny enough, we were talking about this again this morning. There's different ways in which clients can come to you. And some people come to me straight through LinkedIn. Some people come to me because they've been referred by others. My biggest client at the moment is in the States, and I got that through a tweet.
Oh, wow.
So someone tweeted and said, does anyone know anyone who can write about sports betting in USA and Canada? And I'd done a couple of big projects on that last year. So I direct messaged this guy on Twitter and said, yeah, I can do that. He said, let's have a Zoom call. We had a Zoom call. Great. He said, great, let's start doing that. And now I'm doing 2 or 3 pieces a week about sports betting in North America, which is, don't want to get sidetracked, but it's absolutely fascinating. It's an amazingly interesting landscape at the moment. And obviously it draws on my background in both sports journalism and in the betting industry.
Yeah.
And that came from a tweet. So there's no hard and fast rule. Something that someone said to me many years ago, which I've always sort of clung to, which is everyone's worth 20 minutes. It's always worth having a coffee, because you never know the 20-minute conversation that's going to lead to years and years of work. And one of my clients who I was working with when we last spoke and I'm still working for now. And that came from a chance meeting over breakfast at a network. And I'm still doing pieces probably every month or so for them.
I can think of a couple of occasions that something like that's made a difference. I can think of actually as we publish this podcast, it's just over 2 years ago. It's on the, believe it or not, 13th of February 2020. This guy called Dan Wells had been stalking me on LinkedIn and said, "Kevin, can we have a phone call?" I'm thinking, okay, I'll give Dan half an hour.
Giving him a bit more than that now, though, haven't you? Let's face it. I mean,
CFO was bored.
Yeah.
I can think of a similar occasion where this time it was me stalking. Apparently, it was me stalking Graham on a Facebook group of Internet Business Mastery that we both joined.
Yeah. No, and the rest is history. No, I genuinely think you are right, because you are. It was at the time, it was worth giving Kevin the time, and we both benefited from I think it was Skype in those days, Kevin, and basically we had a conversation. And I was telling somebody the other day that Kevin and I have only ever met 4 times physically. We meet each week on the internet, but basically meeting directly, it's been we've kept it to a minimum, really. We don't want to spoil a good thing, do we?
Yeah, absolutely. And similarly, I mentioned Dan Wells up to just before Christmas, when we actually had the very first Grow CFO physical get-together. We'd built up a 6-figure business without ever having met each other face-to-face. And it's amazing the way you can do those things these days.
It is. And one thing I find is that it's been amazing how virtual video meetings, like the one we're on at the moment, have kept things going over the last couple of years. And they can take you so far in a relationship, but there's the extra 10% of body language that you just can't replicate.
No,
I've really enjoyed the resumption of in-person networking events, and a couple I've been to recently. The buzz, the energy has been absolutely tremendous, because people are thinking, I've met you so many times, and now I can actually see you and shake your hand. And good grief, you're 6'10", and I thought you were the same height as me, because we've been looking at each other on screen.
Yeah,
and just little things like that.
It's. I mean, I can't wait to get us all back to they say, oh, won't go back to normal. Well, of course we won't, because it's been a couple of years lost to these damn fool breaks in the way in which we work. If we can get rid of the cloth masks over our face, then so much the better, and quickly. So for me, I think that's really important. And I know that it's happening in America because of political reasons. Of course, all of a sudden the science has been changed. Not the November elections that they're going to get a pan in. No, it's the science. So we'll change everything with the hope that you'll forget what we've done to you for the last 2 years. So, I mean, I'm quite skeptical about what's happened. And I don't know if we're going to be better after 2 years of all of this nonsense, or worse for a while and then better.
It's a good question. And I do think that if there is a moment, if there is a point at which they say, right, finito, official, it's over, I think an awful lot of, and whatever the new normal looks like, we are back at it. That's it. Day one, year zero, we're off to the races again. I think an awful lot of people are going to keel over just from the stress of the last. I think that for so long, business owners have been pushing themselves just to keep the wheels turning and keep the lights on. And eventually there's going to be a price to pay for that. And people are just so stressed, even though that's the time when you want to be pushing on and keeping things going forward. And okay, if this is the new look normal, whatever that landscape looks like, let's do our best.
I think that's very true. But Martin, taking you back to when we last had you on the podcast, I think at that time, I used to see you quite a lot on social media, quite a lot on LinkedIn. I don't see you on that platform anywhere near as often these days.
Have you dropped him from your list then, Martin? That possibly might be an explanation.
That might be the reason. I was going to say to Martin, look, is that because you genuinely feel that social media is more of a waste of energy, and you're better off doing the networking things?
No, to be honest, to be completely honest, Kevin, the reason is because I just don't have as much time as I did those 3 years ago. I'm a massive fan of when I talk about social media in a business context, I'm talking about LinkedIn.
Yeah,
that's really the only place where I talk about business. And someone this morning said to me, you can hook up your LinkedIn and your Twitter feed. I said, I don't want to do that because I talk about very different things on Twitter than I do on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
If you're anything like me, you just talk about football on Twitter.
Yeah, you got me there. And I don't want that appearing on LinkedIn. That's the sort of stuff I come out with. But joking aside, I know that there were certain techniques, and we've been in LinkedIn pods together. And my understanding is that's not as effective a way of spreading your messaging. But having said that, I'm still on LinkedIn, and I keep telling myself I've got to do a piece a week, but it tends to drift. It might be a piece every couple of weeks. And it might be, I think one of the last things I wrote was about Wordle, because I'm a big Wordle fan, as you expect, words. But a lot of it is just that I don't have as much time as I did. And if I get to the end of a week where, I've worked into the night on Friday and I'm desperately trying to get the balance this year to have a proper weekend and not like evenings, but I've got that distant rumbling sound in the background of a snowball that's picking up momentum.
Is it that you're busy because of social media, or actually, was it the social media at the beginning when you did have a bit more time? So if we're talking to our listeners who potentially were at, or are at the place that you were in 2018, maybe they should spend a bit more time on social media and build their kind of connections, etc. But now you're reaping it, as you said right from the top. You're effectively you're so busy, so you're not going to spend too much time on LinkedIn or whatever.
Not too much, but you still got to do it. You've still got to. I know a couple of years ago when I was absolutely not slammed with work, and I remember bumping into a networking pal who said, "Why are you still networking?" I said, "Because you're always looking at the pipeline. You're always wanting things to keep flowing towards you." The best analogy I ever heard about starting up a business is like the old water pump in the village square. And you get the handle and you crank it up and down and you keep going and nothing comes out. And just as you think there's no water down there, it's not going to happen, the water comes out in a gush. But you have to keep pumping. Got to keep, because you've always got the eye on, what's going to be coming through the door next month, the month after. And if you completely remove your presence from social media, people stop. The person who will bring you with an opportunity that might not come to fruition for a few months doesn't see you. So from what you've said, Kevin, it's reminded me I do need to be as active as I possibly can be, and posting on LinkedIn, because one of the things that amazes me was many times I've gone to an event, maybe an expo or a catch up, and someone will say, "Oh, I read your stuff on social media all the time," and I think, but you've never liked or commented or dropped me a phone call or anything. People see it, people notice, and they pick things up. And something great that happened just a few months ago, one of the first in-person events I went to after lockdown, just queuing up for coffee, introduced myself to the guy next to me, and I said my name is the Blue Media. He said, "I've heard of you." And he didn't say how or where, he couldn't remember. He just said, "I know I've heard of you." Now that possibly is because of whatever social media profile I've built up. And I'm sure there's a technical term for it, but just being out there.
I think it's called lying, Martin. Don't let that burst your bubble. But he was just an effective network. No, seriously, it's very likely that he knew. And anybody who's like you, has been working with the England and Wales Cricket Board. I mean, what are you writing for them? Sorry, lads, but we're crap. I mean, you can get it across really quite quickly.
Hey, it's easy. There's this bloke called Jeffrey Boycott, and Martin writes a lot better than him.
When I was there, we were doing all right. No, I'm glad you brought that up. That's probably, over the last few years, I've been lucky to work with some fantastic clients.
Yeah.
And I was asked to go into the ECB to help them out with some internal comms. And that turned into a far more wide-ranging brief. And I absolutely loved it. Any cricket fan knows that walk from St. John's Wood down the hill to the North Gate. It's just magical. I did it 4 days a week.
Wow.
One of the things I really resent about Copywriting, obviously there are many, is that I never took it for granted. If I'd got all Charlie Big potatoes about it,
I love that.
And yet something had come down out of the sky and said, right, we're going to stop. Then I'd have said I deserved it. But every day it was just magical to walk in there and see my favourite building in the whole wide world, the Lord's Pavilion, working there with, and I've got to say this, absolutely brilliant organisation, fantastic people. I know, we could sit and talk all day about what has happened in Australia and the state of the teams at the moment.
I only jest. I don't really follow it that closely, but because it's frankly too painful. But you've got some really nice comments of people who really like your work. One of the things that keeps recurring is this ability to cope with tight deadlines. Give us a clue as to how you cope on behalf of your clients with that. Are there some techniques that help you do that?
I have to have a deadline. I've said to a client recently, when do you want this piece delivered? And she said, just whenever you can get it. I said, don't say that because you'll never get it. But if you say, I want it on my desk at 6 o'clock on Tuesday, then it'll get that time. And it goes back to my time in journalism. I mean, I was a journalism for several decades, and everything in journalism was about that. One of the things we were taught when I was training to be a journalist was the three most important things about you. The third most important is to make it good. The second most important is to make it legal. The most important of all is to get it on time. And just respect the primacy of the deadline at all times. Now, so to me, it's kind of instinctive and automatic. But the simplest way to do it is to, let's say tomorrow I've got a huge piece of work to write about this sports betting. And I think, well, I want to have that done by 6 o'clock. So you work backwards. And say, okay, if I've got to do it, and I'll break it into, there are techniques. If you've got an enormous slab of work, you can break it into smaller, almost like sprints.
Yeah.
So, okay, if I can break that into 10, 25-minute sprints through the day, the first one will start at 9 o'clock in the morning. And then I should be done by 6 o'clock. Now, of course, things come along. Your daughter says, can I have a lift? Or the phone goes, or you go off to have some lunch. But ultimately, you're working towards that deadline. And the key to hitting a deadline is working back from it and just preparing. Mm-hmm. Well, if I've got 1,000 words to write, how long is it going to take? An hour and a half. Therefore, if something's got to be done by 6,
you have to be remarkably good at researching. I mean, the subject because people are going to read what you're going to, and take interest in it, hopefully, and presumably research and actually having, a real knowledge of it is going to come in handy.
Yeah, and I did a big piece last year for Pearson, the educational publisher, and it was several modules for a new course they did. And the writing of it was actually the easy part. The hardest bit was the research, because it had to be very thoroughly researched and very authoritative. To provide all the sources at all stages. So you could have a 400-word piece for which you would consult 10 different sources.
Yeah.
And that's what takes the time. And if nothing else, ask questions. If there's something you don't understand, just say.
You can't price then, Martin, on the basis of the word count, can you?
No, I never price on word count. I always say, sometimes people say to me, how much to write a blog? And I say, how much to buy a car? Because it depends. I did a coffee a website for a guy who's a coffee and a smashing blog, and he wanted some blogs on his site. And I said, why don't we do a super blog about the history of coffee? And it was 2,000 words. And the research that went into that, it was thoroughly enjoyable. It was an interesting subject. But that probably took me the best part of the day, and most of that day was reading rather than writing.
Martin, you must have been listening to one of our old podcasts. We had an SEO expert on the podcast maybe 18 months ago, and we talked about the power of that long blog post. And he was talking about exactly that, writing a blog post about the history of coffee.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I wish I'd heard it. I could have taken some tips from it.
You did hear it. You did hear it. You just nicked our idea. Well, it wasn't our idea, actually. But no, it's so obviously that's interesting. So you would price according to what then?
How long the whole thing is going to take?
Okay, so your hours then. So it's more or less an hour thing. But is there a sense of Well, it's actually the English cricket board. I mean, maybe they can afford a bit more than, I don't know, some other guy.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And sometimes, especially when you're dealing with SMEs, and I know having been, in the startup phase,
yeah,
you're watching every penny. And frankly, at the moment, I'm probably out of the price range of SMEs.
Mm.
And if you it sounds silly. There's always a conversation to be had. There's always a haggle to be had. You can possibly do someone a favor, especially if you see that they're in the position they're going to do something good. And you want to help them along the way. And also, if you think there's going to be more work at the end of it. But no, in my head, it's not. If Barclays Bank came along, I wouldn't say, right, I'm going to charge you double the bank and afford it.
Oh, no, that's a damn fool idea. You should do not double, treble off it. But no, seriously, I think I would really like. I don't know about you, Kevin, but I would really like Martin to give us, if you like, almost like copywriting tips. But I know that you've been a journalist and all the rest of that, but for our listeners, what are the things that they're most likely to be getting wrong that with your tip they can get righter?
Okay, sort of simple basics things like spelling and grammar, they matter. If your spelling isn't absolutely on point, find someone whose spelling is absolutely perfect, because people notice.
Yeah.
People notice if you write your instead of your, or there instead of there. You know what I mean.
So how come the Guardian's still in business?
No comment whatsoever. So it's about getting the basics and the fundamentals. And the other one I always say to people is, when you write something, read it out loud. Because in the process of reading it out loud, if you come to a sentence where you have to read it twice because there's some sort of glitch in the middle of it, go back and rewrite it. And just the actual process of reading it out loud, you can hear whether it's flowing nicely, whether it's delivering the message you want it to deliver. And I've said you might even get someone that you trust to sit there at the keyboard and read it to you, and you go to the other side of the room and listen and think, is that what I want to get across? Am I saying right? Am I saying it smoothly? I mean, you're transferring information from one party to another. You want that process to be as seamless and as easy and as comfortable as possible. So I think sometimes people think they have to almost put on an official corporate voice. And actually, it's much more easy. It's easier to be just conversational and say, I just want to tell you what we do. And I want to tell you how to make the difference it makes to you. So those are 2 points whenever someone asks me that question, what are the basics? It does matter. And just checking it. I was at a networking event a couple of weeks ago, and someone came up to me and she said, I heard you speak at an expo last year, and there's something you said I do every day now. And that's when I send an email to someone, I will go back through and check it before I send it. And it's amazing the things you find. And I do it myself. When I write copy for people, if I finish at 10 o'clock at night, I don't send it then. I'll go to sleep, come back in the morning, go through it with a fresh pair of eyes. And it's amazing the number of things you'll spot. Yeah. Just to make sure, just to that little check to the final polish.
I sometimes get words wrong, and it's you and your. Not that I'm thinking your. In my head, I've written your, but for some reason, I'm pretty sure the system itself has said, oh no, it doesn't mean your, it means you. So I end up putting in some emails when I've sent them, it says you instead of your, and I'm thinking, why has that happened? But it's one, to go to your point, if I read through it, it's obvious that I've the R's missed for some reason. Maybe it's just the way I type. So from that point of view, it's essential. Otherwise, you look a little bit less than what you want to present. So I think those are really, really good tips. Look, Martin, we're coming to the end of the podcast, but one of the things that we really wanted you to sort of go through is it's been a couple of years since we last had you on or so. What's going to happen to you in the next few years? Where are you going to take this business of yours?
Good question. It's something I think of a lot because especially when times have been really good, so overloaded with work, I don't really have the time to do it, but you do it anyway. And people have said, why don't you expand? Why don't you start the Laboo Media empire and try and take it? And the simple reason that I don't is because maybe if I was 28 or 38, that would be a good idea, and I'd have the energy to do it. But the simple fact is, in a couple of months' time, I'm going to be 58. So I've realised, and a fellow attendee on this podcast, a lovely fellow called Big Ian Donaghy, said to me, I was listening to him a few months ago, and I rang him up and I said, you just said something. If you stuck that on a poster, I'll hang it on. Because he was talking about income and turnover and riches and wealth. He said, true wealth is doing work you like for people. Mm. And I've now got, what I want to keep having is a sort of stable, regular clients, but also other clients who come on board, like I say, from one-off contracts or other things that could come online in the future that I really like working with. And that for me is the focus. There's other things I want to do. I started since we last spoke. I've started speaking. I'd like to expand that side of the business. Mm-hmm. I enjoy doing workshops and seminars, talking about the sort of things we've been talking about today. Yeah. And the other thing, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud because it's a hostage to fortune. I've got an idea for a book, for a business book, and I've got no time to write it. And I spoke to a good networking friend of mine, and she got her book published recently, and I was so impressed, genuinely impressed. And she said, right, you've got to do it now. Because she told me the sort of steps that she took to get published. I thought, right, I'll just go ahead and write it. But I don't know when I'm going to do it. But if I can, that's another kind of string to the bow of things I'd like to be doing. But in terms of the day-to-day, like I say, I love writing. I love writing words, doing that. And it doesn't have to be sport. I write about anything. I've done a lot of sport and betting-related things recently. But I just enjoy writing and writing for people I like.
Well, we've heard you speak eloquently today on the Next 100 Days podcast. Martin Booth, thanks again for coming back. You're always welcome. A brilliant copywriter, and people can find you at leboomedia.co.uk.
Yes, they can. And thank you very much, gents. As I can't believe the time has gone this quickly. It's been great fun.
So, Graham, I think there's a load of great lessons there from Martin. And it's really interesting to see how Martin's business has grown so much since we last spoke. I think the one that stands out to me, well, there's several that stand out to me. Number one is the importance of networking.
Yeah.
Number two is the importance about giving everybody a 20-minute call. But I really love that summing up what you do in 10 words.
Oh, honestly, I seem to remember from last time Martin gave us some fantastic pieces of advice, and he keeps doing it. He's a very impressive young man because he's younger than us too. He basically
he doesn't have a 6 in the start of his number.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. He soon will, but not now. But the important thing is his clients are actually making him. He's making his clients successful, and they're actually pushing him further up the value chain. And I think the interesting thing is he's now international. I like what you've just said. He did make it very simple for people to try and overcome their issues, but he also gave us some other tips as well, like you said, to do with, networking and how he would go about doing that, and and the other things that you mentioned. So I think Martin is a great copywriter, and he's got some fantastic clients who say nice things about him. Interestingly, deadline. You must have one.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that echoes for me as well. If something's going to get done, you've got to have a deadline to do it by.
Yeah.
And it's not just that it gives it the right level of attention. It also, for me, it focuses on, what's necessary to get this across the line and what's unnecessary, and you kind of chip away all the unnecessary and just deliver it.
And how he takes his deadline and then he works back, which is interesting. And so there are some techniques. If you're, it's not just about copywriting; it's getting projects done and the whole thing. But in terms of business development, there were some really good things that Martin has shared with us. The one thing he didn't mention is the impact that the next 100 days has done for him, has made for him. And I'm sure, actually, as a guest, and we know this from lots of guests, that when you're on the next 100 days, then you end up ranking on Google. The show will rank for you, and that actually enhances your authority. So, by being on a podcast like this, it can only help your business. So if you
that is an interesting thing, and listeners, you may be thinking that Graham is jesting, but we have actually checked this out.
Yeah, we have.
And quite often when we type the name of a guest into Google to find them, their podcast interview with us actually ranks higher than their own website.
I think this is fresh content, and it's like fresh hot pizza, fresh hot podcast from next 100 days. And the whole idea of this is that it's 3/4 of an hour or so of really good stuff from that individual. So if somebody wants to check them out, they're going to get some really hopefully helpful advice. And I'm sure some of his clients would have looked at that podcast or would have listened to that podcast, and that would have strengthened their resolve to do business with him. So look, on that bombshell, we'll call it a day for today. Martin Booth back again with us today. Well, I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.